Hey, this is Alpha for Shock's video guide, and today we're going to be taking a look at a Terran versus Zerg opening a 1-Rax fast expand into Widow Mines instead of Hellions, as we would have seen in Wings of Liberty. Now, since Heart of the Swarm has now come out, we're going to be, of course, fully switching over to Heart of the Swarm, and all the strategies we put out will be Heart of the Swarm strategies. But this also means that all the replays we put out will be Heart of the Swarm replays, so bear that in mind when you go to download the replays, that you will need to have Heart of the Swarm in order to watch them. So the idea of this build that we're going to be looking at today is, we saw in Wings of Liberty that for a long time Terrans against Zerg were opening up with a reactor Hellion kind of opening where they'd get 4 Hellions and they'd use them to gain some map control and maybe get a chance of roasting some drones. But then the Queen buff happened, and after that, the opening was still fairly popular in the sense that it was still viable, but it didn't really pack the punch that Terrans needed to actually put pressure on and really contain the Zerg player. So there was a bit of struggle in Terran versus Zerg where a lot of Terran players weren't really sure what to do. And now that Heart of the Swarm is out, we see that the Widow Mine actually accomplishes something a little bit different than the Hellion opening, and that is that it allows you to get into a very greedy macro position without sacrificing defense. The Widow Mines are very excellent defense. So we're going to see how that works in this game, and we're going to see that a lot of the things that Terran players were struggling with, like Roach pressures or Roach Ling all-ins or Roach Baneling all-ins, are not really that much of a problem when you have a couple of Widow Mines sitting outside your base ready to demolish any aggression. So we see that we have our 2 players here. In the bottom right corner we have the blue Terran Mashiro, who will be following for this game. That's Shoks. And in the top left, his opponent, the red Zerg Slick. And we see that Mashiro has opened up with a fairly standard, 1-Rax opening, and then it's taking a gas, only putting 2 guys on gas. So this is a little bit different than a standard, 1-Rax expansion. There we go, the 3rd guy on gas. Just a small slip up there, not a big deal. And he's also getting his 2nd command center now. So this is a very economic opening. We are not opting for any super early pressure, but we are basically trying to get an expansion up safely, and we want to get into a solid macro position. So we're continuing to build SCVs. The game is, of course, quite early now. We're continuing to build SCVs. We're continuing to build our supply depots when we need them. And we're saving up money now because we're going to put down a very important structure, and that is the factory. Now, the factory, of course, is what we are going to be using to make those precious Widow Mines. And you'll notice that we're getting a reactor on the barracks, and this is because Widow Mines can actually be reactored out. So that's something to bear in mind. They're not a tech lab unit, which means that much like Hellions, they can be made 2 at a time. So this means that we're going to be able to get a decent number of Widow Mines out fairly quickly, which is helpful because we need them to defend against any particular pressure. So we've got our 2nd command center now finished, and we are going to get our 2nd gas as well and saturate it immediately. Widow Mines do cost some gas. And we are going to be adding a 3rd command center. So this is a very economic build. And one of the things that is difficult in Wings of Liberty is, how can we take these 3 orbital command centers and be safe against Zerg pressures or all-ins? And the answer in Heart of the Swarm is, well, you have the Widow Mine, and the Widow Mine is basically a constantly recharging bomb that can allow you to hold off against some of these aggressive pressures. So we see that we're putting down a bunker down at the low ground so that we can float down this orbital, and we're continuing to build our Widow Mines here. We're getting 2 Widow Mines, and we're continuing to make Marines, researching STIM, of course, very essential upgrade, because we are going to transition into a sort of bio-centric play here. And we see that the Widow Mines are burrowing. It's important to burrow your Widow Mines in positions where enemy units are likely to go. See, this one is, of course, guarding this ramp, and this one is guarding the bunker. Now, of course, the first things that Zerg players will do if they're doing some sort of aggressive all-in rather than just a run-by, is they're going to go and try and focus down the defensive structures like bunkers. Now this Widow Mine is in pretty good position so that any units coming around through here will be cut off, and this one is in good position so that any attacks into the main will be cut off. Now we got 2 more Widow Mines coming out. We're burrowing them pretty close. We're using this one to cover this sort of side. You know, anyone who tries to go directly for the command center is going to get a mouthful of this Widow Mine. And we see that back at home we're adding on a couple of barracks. We're getting in a reactor on our factory that we have, of course, we're getting a starport now on the other reactor. We do need those medevacs. And we're just continuing to macro up, building SCVs, making Marines as we can, getting reactors on our barracks so that we can get even more Marines. And really we can see that from the supply, it's quite even. So we're actually not doing too bad. So really we want to just keep making Marines, and we feel safe. Even though we only have a few Marines right now, and we open 3 OC, we have 4 Widow Mines. So any attack is going to be very weak against this kind of Widow Mine defense, because most Zerg attacks do not come equipped with an Overseer, especially not most Zerg all-ins. So from here we're just going to progress into a very standard, very safe macro position. We're going to be taking our 3rd base because we don't see any pressure from the Zerg player. And we're going to start making some Marines and just keep making them. We've got our engineering bays up, and we're going to be getting upgrades quite soon. We got our armory up for possible Hellbats. And from here we just progress into a very standard macro game. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and you can see how the Widow Mine really enables Terrans to play a very economic style in early game Terran versus Zerg, taking those 3 orbitals. Feel free to check out our existing library of strategies, tips, and more, and we'll be putting out more and more Heart of the Swarm videos as time goes on. Thanks for watching.